Squatchers Lounge podcast with your hosts, the two biggest nobodies in Bigfooting. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Mr. Jeffrey Kelly and his sidekick, the handsome Kip Morrow. What is happening, fellas?
Welcome, everybody, to the third episode of the Squatchers Lounge podcast. Tonight we're going to have our guest, Michael Merchant, join us, and he's going to give us all his thoughts on current events, and we're going to talk to him about Out of the Wild, Venezuela, and get his thoughts on that, all of that since it's wrapped up. And as with me always is our buddy Kip Morrow, ex-supermodel, current firefighter. How you doing this afternoon, Kip?
Doing great, Jeff. And actually, I'm still a supermodel. It's just I don't do it as often now. So I'm still
that's wonderful to know. That's great to hear that you're still in the business of male supermodeling. Okay,
that's what I do.
So there's a whole lot of stuff in the news this week. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. Why don't you go ahead and give us your commentary from the King of Kipistan, Kip Morrow?
Well, I got my ideas on a few things, but basically, here we are. We've got the Ketchum DNA paper. It's finally published. It's confirming that Bigfoot Sasquatch indeed exists. This very scientific paper has been properly peer-reviewed and accepted into a prestigious scientific journal for publication. Now all the skeptics will be silenced, left alone to remove the egg from their faces. Not so fast. It quickly became apparent that the little-known scientific journal, De Novo, was actually born out of the necessity to have a place to publish this very paper. In general usage, de novo is a Latin expression. It means from the beginning, afresh, anew, beginning again. So it would appear that Dr. Ketchum was in need of a new beginning for her research. Fair enough. The problem here again lies within the need for transparency in everything Bigfoot Sasquatch related. The more we fail at this, the more difficult it becomes to achieve any kind of credibility. Dr. Ketchum failed at being upfront about the fact that this scientific journal was basically created for her paper to finally be published. In less than an hour's time, it was discovered that this was the case. So here we are, guilty by association to a paper that is all but the laughingstock of the scientific community. Was the science even sound? I'm not a scientist, but from what I understand, there were many reasons why nobody would touch this. Was there unfair bias from the scientific community? Absolutely. That's exactly why this study had to be perfect, and from the collection of the samples, this was not the case. We'd all like to believe that each sample was collected with the utmost care and scientific perfection, like watching an episode from CSI. We can all picture the masked, gloved scientific technician carefully taking the hair sample with a sterile pair of tweezers, placing it in a plastic bag, then into a paper bag, all the while following and documenting the chain of custody. The reality is that these samples were collected with no documented protocol. In more easy-to-understand terminology, they were kind of winging it. And because of that, the possibility or even the probability of contamination goes without saying. So if our quest to find the truth is to be taken seriously by the scientific world, then any chance we get to be in the limelight needs to be as transparent and professional as possible. Unfortunately, all they see are pathetic and half-assed attempts to pull one over on them. Our only saving grace to be taken serious is to be as transparent and professional as we can, even if the outcome isn't what we had hoped for. Until then, expect that the media is going to continue to focus on what the most ridiculous examples of Bigfooting in order to support the general public's perception that we're all a bunch of lunatic fringe, low IQ, knuckle draggers that are sharp as bowling balls and twice as smart. And that's what I had, Jeff.
Awesome. Love to hear that from the King of Kipistan. Absolutely. So this afternoon we've got with us the absolute king of Team Taser is the original Snowwalker Prime, Michael Merchant. How are you doing this afternoon, Michael?
I'm very good. We're in a blizzard, so if you lose me, that's why.
It's okay. We were so happy that you were able to join us this afternoon. One of the things I wanted to talk about is I went back and I actually reviewed the entire series of Out of the Wild, Venezuela, where Michael Merchant was one of the cast members. And I wanted to get a chance to get your thoughts on the experience of being a cast member in a reality show. You know, what was the first experience? How did they approach you to it?
How did I get involved in it?
Yeah, how did you get involved with the Out of the Wild, Venezuela?
Oh, gosh, it was really Kathy found it and just said something to me about it. It was all I heard was Amazon. I always wanted to go to the Amazon. She goes, "There's this thing they'll send to the Amazon." So we went out and made a video. Took us like 5 minutes. Like 2 days later, they called me. A week later, I was in LA, and like 2 weeks later, I was in Venezuela.
Wow! Oh wow, that's a fast.
Before I knew it, I was in the jungle.
So, you know, I saw this. I saw the whole setup. You know, they tell you that you're going in with a bunch of people, and you know you're going to try and survive as long as you can. There's going to be a base camp for you when you get there, and you know the very first episode, I saw that you twisted your knee all up, And, I thought that was going to be it for you from the very beginning. But, the badass that you are, marches all your way into their supposed camp to find, a mud hole. Nothing. Zero. No food, no nothing, no setup, barely enough tools to even get you going. And here you are stuck in the middle of the Amazon with people that, really aren't of your caliber of woodsmanship with nothing and nobody. What was your mental capacity at that point?
Well, the lowest point, I think it was episode 2 when my knee went out, but we had a couple days, like 3 solid days of doing a lot of hiking, and they dropped us off. It was 9,300 feet on the top of that Tepui, Mount Roraima. And I think we dropped 3,000 feet elevation in one day. And then to walk around a thing, you go down 1,000 feet, you go up 1,000 feet, down another 1,000 feet, and it's not like you're on a hiking trail. It's rocks and just horrible, horrible stuff. So I was pretty depressed when I thought I was done. And thanks for calling me a badass. I don't think I was a badass. I just really wanted to get into that jungle bad enough that I would have crawled my ass down through there if I'd had to.
Oh no, you earned your palladium coated badass kit when you went after the pit viper with a branch you just busted off in the trash over there. I mean, that was all there was to it. When you said,
it wasn't a full-grown pit viper.
No, but it was still food for everybody, and that was your first thought. It wasn't food for me. It was, everybody's in bad spirits, everybody's hungry. I'm out here, I found it, and it's something that I can show. Look, I can help feed us. I'm not just going to try and take over. I want to be a team player, but y'all need to play with me as well. Because it seemed like everybody was against you from the beginning. It was like nobody wanted to cooperate. They always wanted to do things the opposite of what Michael Merchant thought.
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose I can be a little irritating. And the thing is, I saw certain things that needed to be done, and I've had enough time now, a couple of years have gone by to look back. I think the absolute biggest problem that we had, at the time I thought it was everybody wanted to have a committee meeting and decide everything. And indigenous people don't usually spend a lot of time in committee meetings. They just do shit. Shit
well,
gets
that's why
done.
there's a chief. A chief knows what he's doing, therefore he makes decisions and people follow. But the democratic way doesn't work in the jungle too well.
Well, it works for the indigenous people, which is why they're there, and the ones that didn't work died. Like, if we'd been left there, we wouldn't have really, been much of an issue for the Pomone, because we would have all died, I think. Well, I wouldn't have died, but here's the problem with the group, is that the mentality was, the cameras are on us, we'll go fish for 15 minutes. Then the camera leaves. Oh, we're done fishing.
Yeah,
if you're a fisherman, it doesn't work that way. People, like my dad used to be a fisherman, they'd fish for 20, 30 hours without any sleep nonstop.
Right, I would be up for 36 hours making sure that I had enough food for 5 or 6 days, rather than spend 15 minutes a day trying to catch little tiny fish. I would have devised some type of a trot line or something out of the local vines if I had to make sure that I had a constant supply of larger fish to eat.
I'm telling you, man, it was hard. There wasn't a lot of protein available down there. It was mostly insect based. The fish for the most part were really, really tiny, because I spent a lot of time making. You don't see it. They edited it out, but I spent a lot of time making fish traps, setting things up, trying to, I was pretty much going day and night trying to get as much food as I possibly could get in, because, you'd only be in an area for 3 days, and you had to hike for a day. So you get to the area, you have to try to set up camp, you're exhausted. The next day you're doing recon. Basically, the day where you start to figure out where the stuff is, where the food is, now you have to leave.
And on day 4, day 4 or something like that, the starvation starts in. So the fat starts to get eaten from the brain first, which means people aren't thinking straight to begin with. So now you've already got the case where you're already exhausted getting into the first camp, and now you've moved on, so you don't know where the food sources are again, so the starvation even starts. Worse. By the end of the series, you were just emaciated to the point, I was really scared that you might not survive physically, die there. You were so skinny. You could tell that the psychological effects were starting to take on you, and and people don't realize that starvation causes long-term psychological effects on people even after the fact.
Oh man, just ask Kathy. I'm still not right. I
wasn't going to say anything.
You don't believe it. I had a sweater box full of shit that I had with me and I didn't stop eating for 4 months.
He was really bad for 30 days, eating nonstop. I was cooking constantly.
I didn't like people touching my food. You don't get involved in this is my food.
And your food is not my food too.
But I'm much better now, guys.
That's good. That's good. You know, would you do it again? That's really the question that I had.
Oh
to
yeah, in a
ask.
second.
So
I'd love to go
would
again.
you'd take a reality show position in some type of a African adventure on the safari to try and
I could really give a flying fig about the reality show aspect of it, but if somebody would just push me out of a plane someplace in the jungle and let me go, yeah, I'd be up for that.
Well, that was the difference. That's the difference I was asking. So the reality show part of it you could care less about, but you'd rather take the adventure instead.
If the camera guys can keep up, man, they're welcome to it.
I'd love to see, a Les Stroud style show following Michael Merchant through, even the wilds of America.
Me too. I'd like to see that too.
I mean, that would just be, it would be entertaining. I mean, but, you'd have to do all your own camera work and all of that stuff. You don't need a film crew if you do it Les Stroud style.
Well, you get Roe.
Yeah, well, Roe, from what I understand, doesn't want to stay in the woods anymore. He wants to be able to park and make sure that there's a motel within sleeping distance from wherever they're going.
Yeah.
He's badass.
I've got Roe covered. We already talked. We've got the plan next time, so it's all good.
Good.
So Michael, it's funny. My wife and I, we were trying to find something entertaining on Netflix one day, and so we found this documentary talking about Out of the Wild. So we started watching it and just glued to it. Watched the entire thing through probably 2 days, and I found you to be very interesting and very well. It goes without saying, right? But you were extremely interesting.
Nice job, man. Yeah.
But the fact that you made it through, I thought, wow, that guy's the real deal. And so I friended you on Facebook. Had no idea that you had anything to do or had any belief in the same thing that I believed in Bigfoot. And so I'd kind of like to find out, when did you really start getting into this whole Bigfoot thing? Was it well before the show, I'm assuming? And
just a little kid, man. Back, I can't even remember when it was I don't even know what the movie was. What was the movie that they had, the original Patterson? Remember, it was a movie, and it was all drummed up. I can remember my dad took me to the cinema down. We lived in Rockland down on the coast. It was this little cinema. It was a big deal, going to the movies. And I can remember seeing that. When they finally showed that critter, the money shot at the end, I was hooked.
Yeah, that's I was right there with you. Now, unfortunately, Michael has dropped from us. Right. No, there he is. All right, you froze up for just a moment. Wonderful, you're back. Okay, cool. Yeah, that was
Patterson movie. That movie.
I can't remember the name of the movie either.
yeah, I don't either.
But I remember the first time I saw the footage was actually on I believe it was In Search Of in the 70s with Leonard Nimoy. I'm a child of the early 70s, so I didn't get the early exposure of seeing it in the movies. But I do remember the times when movies did have little movies or little newsreels before the show actually started. So I am familiar with that. But it was like In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy, I think, that first showed me the footage as a kid. And I had already been in the school library with the the Bigfoot book that has the Yeti footprint on the front of it with the pickaxe next to it.
Right.
And I've read and checked that thing out so much that the pages were worn. I had gotten notices to return it 8 or 10 times. And that's so I got hooked on the same footage. So you saw it in the theater for the first time. How old do you figure? 5, 6 years old? I mean.
I don't know, man. I was little. I just know that at the time, because, I kid about being raised by wolves, but I did grow up in the forest pretty much. So I had a lot of chance to look. And after seeing that, of course, you're thinking, wow, I wonder if that thing is really out there. So you're looking for it.
So it wasn't a monster to you? Because that was the first thing. That was the first experience I remember of seeing Bigfoot was, oh, man, that's a giant monster living in the forest.
That's interesting. I don't. Maybe Kathy worries about me, and maybe there's not something quite wired right upstairs. But like when I was in Venezuela, they filmed a cougar, and we knew there was jaguars and stuff around there. But for me to encounter something like that is very exciting. Now, once the encounter occurs, if I start picking up signs from the critter that it wants to eat me, then it can go in a different direction. But initially, I don't run around being fearful of that sort of thing.
I'm the same way. I grew up in the woods. I was camping in the womb. I was tent camping.
Yeah.
So I've been around that type of thing my entire life. And I come across a bear, and it's like, okay, let me see if it sees me first, and then see how it's going to react. If it's going to go the other way, it was a wonderful experience. If it stops and growls at me, I back out slowly and beat the hell out of town. You just got to be smart in the woods when you grow up that way.
I'm just afraid of everything. I run in a panic, just out of the woods. No.
Well, that was That was one of the things that I had noticed about the Tim Holmes documentary. I was going to see are you familiar with who Tim Holmes are? You remember the Bigfoot bunker video where he got kicked away from a certain show that we're not going to talk about tonight.
Yeah, poor guy. I felt bad for him.
Yeah, well, he did a documentary with the guys from Planet Weird called The Bigfoot Hunter Still Searching.
Yeah, I've seen some of that. They're shooting shotguns all the time, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they go out, they take the kids out to a meadow, and there's a possible movement in the woods, and Tim immediately runs to the middle of the meadow and starts pointing his shotgun at the woods, telling everybody, get away, while his partner Becky Sawyer is still looking in the woods trying to get close enough to see it. So there's that whole fight or flight thing. Some people fly, some people run away, and some people will, stand their ground and see how things turn out.
Look, I can tell you this, man. I've spoken to enough witnesses that I've gotten goosebumps listening to their stories, and I've encountered a lot of critters in the woods. I don't know, if a Bigfoot came charging at me, and yeah, it would probably scare the crap out of me, but I would still find it exciting. But that's just how I'm wired. I just find that stuff kind of cool.
I mean, out of the experiences that we've all heard of, the terrifying ones, and I've had a terrifying one myself, but that was one out of
us about it, right?
That was one out of 20, where anything had ever gotten close over 15 years. I think I had 20 experiences. I've got them all logged somewhere. And that was the only one that was terrifying. The other 19 experiences that I had were just simple passings, or curious interest was more the liking. I don't think that they're out there, as some people would like to believe in the missing 411 books, kidnapping people and making them disappear forever. I don't think they're some monstrous, just malignant entity in the woods causing havoc. They're just another one of God's creatures that lives out there, and there's just so few of them, we don't come across them enough to know about them yet.
Well, I mean, but bears, 99, I don't know, you put some percent to it, the majority of bears aren't going to hurt you, even grizzly bears, but people do get eaten by grizzly bears. I would assume an apex predator is going to have a bad day on an occasion, and so I don't completely discredit the idea that these things could be eating people or kidnapping them, or I don't know, whatever they want to do with them, but I don't think it happens very often. I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the capability there, because, I mean, an orangutan can rip a human's arm off and beat him to death with it. So an 8-foot primate, or an 8-foot great primate line is going to have the same type of strength and be able to rip you from limb if it needed to. But I think that would be the case.
Giant rocks at you.
Right, well, that would be the case. I think it'd be more where you corner such an animal and make it have no choice before it really wants to do any harm to you. I think that's more, or you startle a young, or you approach a young or a pregnant female. You're going to get a reaction like you would out of any mammal that you're, now encroaching on some of their young's territory.
To my knowledge, I could be wrong on this. You could correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't have any report of anybody being attacked and wounded and then surviving a Sasquatch attack, right?
Well, Osman has the Osman story was, he was kidnapped and kept for 3 or 4 days.
But I mean, he wasn't attacked like they were trying to eat him.
No, I think his thoughts were they wanted him to mate with the female is what I think the story actually ended with.
Well, Ketchum should like that. That would fit up with her story.
Well, that's another thing. We'll get into that just here in a minute. I think Kip's got a couple of questions from the chat room.
Yeah, the first one, somebody wants to know if the giant sloth really exists in South America. Is that something that's down there, and did you come in contact with anything that could have been that?
Here's the thing. A lot of people believe the giant sloth was this huge critter. I think it was, 6 feet high at the shoulder or something, could stand up maybe 10 foot tall, really large, 800,000 pounds, something like that. I'm just guessing. But it was supposedly went extinct 10,000 years ago. There have been persistent reports from areas in South America of people reporting seeing these things. And we were in this area of grassland, and whatever the hell we saw was huge and colored the same color as the grass. Now, the most likely scenario was that it was a grass-colored giant anteater, because they are there. But it looked like a giant sloth to me, but I was starving to death.
Right. Could have been a little bit of a hallucination.
Everything was food, right?
What's that?
Everything was food, right?
Yeah.
Damn
well,
close.
Actually, I'll tell you now, I didn't mean to do it at the time, but I think that we consumed endangered freshwater land crabs, because I caught a few land crabs and it never showed up. And I researched it afterwards; they're extremely rare. So.
Wow.
So yeah, we ate whatever we get our hands on that they would allow us to eat.
So Tammy wants to know, Michael, which bug was the tastiest?
Oh, the Minichi grubs are delicious.
Really?
They're nutty, and they got an oil, kind of like a sesame seed oil flavor to them, and they've got this consistency when you bite into them. The center's all kind of creamy and nutty tasting, a little bit of cheese consistency to it, and the outside is more crispy and the head's crunchy. Absolutely delicious. I'd eat them even if I wasn't starving.
See, I'm more into like this. It's my Moe's bacon chocolate bar, but I probably would have taken a bunch of those into the bush with me. But
Minichi grubs, really good. You ever get the chance to eat them? I highly recommend them.
How big?
Oh, they're quite large. I think there's video of them, and they pulsate when you're cooking them.
Those are the ones that you dig out of the wood, out of the wood bark themselves, right? You knock on them to see if it's hollow, and then you go in there and dig them out.
Well, it's the Minichi palms. They fall down. They're like a piece of steel. It is unbelievably difficult to get into them, and the Minichi worms are only in the areas where they rot. And the ones that we collected, we had to sit in water, and we were constantly being covered by scorpions and tarantulas.
Wow. Yeah. See,
And the scorpions were of a variety that the Pomone said no antidote, and was like, said don't get stung, like bad.
yeah, the scorpions I can deal with, but all spiders must die. I'm sorry.
So the scorpions, as they ran by, we would catch them and cut off their stinger, and we'd eat them while we were digging out the Minichi.
Scorpion makes a fine meal. Yes, it does.
Wow.
It tastes a little bit like a raw shrimp.
Yeah, they do have a gamey, salty, kind of squishy taste to them.
They're not bad. Scorpions aren't bad.
No, they're really not. I don't know about the tarantula. I know people that do eat them.
Man,
When I was in Asia, they used to serve tarantula on a stick, and you could they would deep fry them and put a skewer on them, and they would serve them in the street as street food, like we buy a hot dog.
And I heard they taste really good with rice whiskey. When I was in Cambodia, that's what I heard.
There's some things I didn't eat, like Nick would eat the stomach and intestines out of the turtles I was catching, and I drew the line. I'm like, I would use it for bait to catch something else to eat, but I'm not really interested in eating the stomach of this turtle.
Yeah, the intestinal tract, I think I'll pass. I think I'll do without those calories.
Yeah.
But I mean, what are they really eating? I mean, the
That's
turtles
what I figured. What's in there?
Yeah, I mean, were they vegetarian turtles or were they carnivore turtles?
No, they're fish eating. So the ones I was getting were some variety of a side neck turtle, which are almost completely aquatic.
Oh, great! So you've got the salmonella in there from the digesting food and all the bacteria from the dead fish that are in the intestinal tract. Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think I'll skip on that one.
We did cook it. I mean, it was cooked.
Hey, when you're hungry, though, I guess, huh?
Yeah.
I saw you eat those snakes, and that was something I would have a hard time with, but
Delicious.
I watched you do that.
You would have a hard time eating snake, really?
Say again?
I said, you say you'd have a difficult time eating a snake?
I would.
I think if it was served to you, I think if somebody else captured it, skinned it, cooked it, and put it on a plate with a sauce, you'd never know the difference. I think you wouldn't have a problem eating it.
If
delicious.
I probably did know, I think it's just mentally getting past some of those things. When you're so hungry and you're so tired, I imagine it makes it easier to eat some of those things, like the grubs or whatever it might be.
Something. Here's the thing, man. I would eat those things right now, even if I wasn't starving. Like, I don't really have a problem eating those things. I grew up eating stuff I suppose it would make a lot of people sick. Because I grew up on the coast, and my dad lobstered, and I didn't know it at the time, but we were considered really poor, so we ate stuff like I don't know, whelks and clams, and a lot of that stuff we ate raw.
I grew up around the Chesapeake Bay, and we would go 10 days camping up at the cliffs and do nothing but eat crab that we caught. Eat crab and fish out of the Chesapeake Bay that we ate for 10 days straight.
Which is like a giant spider.
Yeah, well, no, that's the horseshoe crab. Maryland actually has the blue crab as well. They're famous for it. Huge blue crab, 12 inches across.
You eat the horseshoe crab? That's edible?
No, you don't eat the horseshoe crab.
I was going to say, because that's got like blue blood or something.
Yeah, no, you eat the Maryland blue crab. They're huge.
Oh, the crab that they eat the whole thing when it's soft.
Yes, the soft shell crab comes that way. That's the blue crab. That we would live on that for 10 days. I mean, just be in heaven. Striped bass, bluefish, whatever we could get out of the water, and that's what we did for fun. It wasn't because we were poor. It was But
Kip brings up, it's Kip, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
It's
Kip brings up a really good point about food aversions. Like Westerners, we're raised on McDonald's and whatnot, and what we don't realize is majority of the other countries, the other cultures, a lot of their protein sources come from insects.
I did find that in Cambodia, and like Jeff was saying, we stopped on a bus coming back into Siem Reap from Phnom Penh, and yeah, there was a little girl selling tarantulas, deep fried tarantulas, and we were told, yeah, it was great with rice whiskey, and I just mentally just can't get past it. But for them, it's no big deal. So you're absolutely right. I think it's just cultural things that we're used to. You know, hamburger looks great to me. Maybe to somebody from India, it's not so good.
It's the
They
same
put
thing.
termites on the pizza down there in Venezuela.
It's the same thing when you travel to Africa. I mean, you know, it's not unheard of to find zebra meat in, you know, some places to eat in Africa. It's just, you know, bush meat. They go out and they capture the monkeys and they eat the monkeys, you know, because they feed themselves. You know, they eat whatever they're capable of capturing. And you're right. We're so spoiled here that it really gets to a point that it's decadent. You know, Americans are decadent, and we can't do
what
anything
else it does to us?
anymore.
If you guys both watch the show, like, of course, I was kind of starving, but if you're in a survival situation and you're a civilized Westerner, you have the tendency to bypass food sources and not really recognize that it's a food source. Like, I had run across those wasps and didn't really, I mean, I knew it was edible, but I hadn't thought about it at the time. We didn't eat them until the next day.
Yeah, that's sometimes you have to just put it aside sometimes and get to it later. All right, so now let's get into the more current event stuff here. The Ketchum study has been released, and I really wanted to get your thoughts. You have wildlife experience. You understand the way biology works and the way that the world works on physics. What are your thoughts on her paper?
Well, I see a couple. The biggest problem that I see is the fact that either her or David Pauly's made the statement that everybody had been tested to eliminate contamination by the people collecting the samples. I think Kip went, I mean, I was in and out because of the storm, but Kip said something about, you know, I'm sure the researchers did the best to get those samples, but she said that was done. And then in the paper it says that some people were tested. We might as well not test anybody. What the hell, you tested some of the people collecting the samples? And then the other thing I have a problem with is that she said that the DNA that they found that supposedly was the hybrid with the Bigfoot was African and Northern European.
Right.
That doesn't match up with the Burling Landstrait hypothesis that she puts forth.
It would be of Asian descent, correct. It would be almost the same as what the Native American bloodline would be.
You would expect to find, you know, the indigenous people, Mexicans, I mean, you know, people, the Indians, the people that were here that came over.
Right.
If Bigfoot came over with them as she's claiming, then you would, and even if it didn't, even if Bigfoot was already here and this hybridization was going on, and what we know that these people have been here for what, 30,000, 50,000 years? I mean, there's some debate, but a hell of a long time, right?
Longer than what they're talking about this hybrid comes across, correct.
Exactly. So for her not to have, you would expect, if that hypothesis had any substance to it, you would expect the humans to all be of indigenous people of some sort.
One of the comments that she had made,
Europeans, that's ridiculous.
one of the comments she had made that was that she had in fact tested everybody, you know, all the submitters' DNA. Justin here on our last podcast was live with us, and in fact stated that she never got a copy of his DNA from him. So if she had it, she got it from somebody else. That's the only thing that he could say, was he never submitted a sample to her, and that was, you know, the prime example of sample that they had in their study was that piece of meat that he submitted without a DNA to check against his contamination, when we have a picture of it, of the meat in his hand. So we know it's contaminated with Justin Smeha. We know that from the very beginning. Even though it's been chopped up and cleaned and purified and all that stuff she wants to say, his DNA is still mixed in with that piece of sample.
That's the other thing that's kind of strange, and I could be mistaken on this, but after having studied that paper, it appeared to me that she had very few, if any, like, false positives, or, you know, like, out of all the samples, 80 or 90% of them tested positive for human hybrid Bigfoot. It was like, I didn't see any in there that was like, oh, this was Sally. We have to get rid of this one. This one was contaminated. Like, there was none of that, right?
Well, that was the thing, is we don't know. The data set hasn't been released.
Well, that's
so
true.
We don't know. We don't know what's been tested, what hasn't been tested. We don't know what samples were used and what the conclusions on those samples were, because none of the data set was actually released. So we're still waiting for that. You know, she says she's waiting for the GenBank upload before she releases any of that data, but, you know...
Yeah, but, you know, even if you look at, like, this is the thing about some somebody claiming, somebody hoaxing and saying they shot a Bigfoot, and then people, I said this to you before, debating, where the shot placement was. If the whole story is a load of bollocks to begin with, what's the point of debating? Like, if she made this statement that they had tested everybody, and then in the paper she says they didn't, and then in the paper she makes this hypothesis that doesn't make any sense, claim the samples were in GenBank, Dr. Jeff Melman checked on it, they're not. And then she turns around and said that the paper was peer-reviewed, but because, whatever reason, they wouldn't publicize it, so now they've bought the publication and she's self-published. And she's claiming she's peer-reviewed. Nobody peer-reviewed this. All she did was take this thing and make a website and self-publish it and then run around and say, hey, it was peer-review.
And charge $30 to see it.
Well, yes, she can charge whatever she wants to for it, but, I mean, you're just making shit up.
Well, the $30 charge for the white paper isn't out of hand. Lots of publications do that. However, they do it because they retain peer reviewers, and they pay those people an annuum to do the peer reviews for them. Exactly. So if you don't have any peer reviewers in there that you're paying to do the peer reviewing...
But she's saying there is. My question is, if there's peer reviewers there, and this is episode 1, series 1, and her paper, what were they peer reviewing before her paper?
I think her claim is that she's still claiming the peer review from one of the prior journals who wouldn't print the peer-reviewed acceptance because the lawyer said that they couldn't.
And so we just have her to accept her word for this.
Just like all the data.
Right, which is a bunch of BS. Anybody with a... You look, like I said, no one of any credited university, credited any organization has come forth to champion this paper. Every single one of them has condemned it, ridiculed it, said it's ridiculous.
So, Michael, do you think it's ethical to even charge for the paper? Is that something that was a question actually coming from the chat?
You know what I think she should be doing? Considering the amount of money that I heard was funded in this study, she should be charging about $1,000 for each copy.
I agree.
Maybe.
Obviously, the camp is out of money because if you look at the production value of what they have for their websites that's up, they're all on free web servers. There's no web development in them whatsoever. There's no graphics development. No, I'm talking about Ketchum's actual websites themselves. Her DNA and her genome program websites are horribly, horribly free designed on a free web server. So there's obviously no money left in the camp. So you're right. They should be charging $10,000 a copy so that maybe the media might pay it, and poor Wally might get some of his money back because the exorbitant amount of money that he alone has in the study, let alone anyone else who was duped into giving the woman money for the study.
How many thousands of man hours is that?
Well, yeah, well that's the other point. Yeah, I mean, how much is an hour of worry worth to you? To me, it's about $1,000 an hour. If I have to worry for 1 hour, I'm going to charge you $1,000. So, she owes me a few $1 million over just the last 2 years of saying she's going to publish.
Well, it's sad too because there's a lot. I mean, we all know people that have contributed samples to that study, and the majority of people that I know that contributed samples are good people, serious researchers. They're really trying to unravel the mystery, trying to get to the bottom of it. And I think it's unfortunate that, she's tarnishing the whole thing by trying to... In other words, she's trying to ride on the reputation of these other people, if you ask me. Something. She's certainly not looking for the truth.
Got a question from the chat room, and it's a good one, and it's one that I wanted to get your opinion on too, Michael. Stefan wants to know, do you think Melba is going to set the topic of Bigfoot back? I mean, is this something that... Is it just something that's going to ride out and kind of fade, or do you think it's something that could really hurt the field?
That's a really good question, and I'm sure people are going to debate that. And I've pondered that a little bit, and I hate to say it because I know that other freezer nitwit, he claimed that his hoax improved the field, and I don't think it did. But I think what this will do to the field is raise the bar. So maybe that'll be good. I really think that you need a body in a box. If they've got 50,000 of these things running around, 1,000 per state, I just want one in a box, man. Is that asking so much?
No, it's not, and that's another problem, is the funding. We don't have any funding in this field to put real researchers on real money to get the real equipment to get the problem solved.
Well, Melrum's got the blimp.
Well, he doesn't have the blimp. He has the blimp project idea. He doesn't have the. He doesn't have the funding to do it. I mean, $330,000 to put, a PhD or a professor of anthropology in a program that he believes in. It's not a whole lot of money. It's not a whole lot of money at all, and that would fund it for like 6 weeks of actual investigation.
I love the blimp idea.
I love the Falcon Project idea. I want to have him on and talk to him about it. I think it is too because just like you or I, if we see a blimp up in the woods, if we're out hunting in the woods for deer, and all of a sudden we see this blimp, we're going to go and investigate it. We're going to go find out what it is, and that's all we need. Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Might take it down.
It's the government.
It's the drones coming in to spy on me hunting. Yeah, exactly. But there's a lot of projects out there. I think Kip's got another question from the chat room there.
Yeah, Racer9X wants to know do you think she's just trying to make money? Is this the con? Is this something that maybe she can actually make some dough off of, and is that why she's putting it out there? Is it really for the good of Bigfooting, or is it to make a buck?
Have you seen anybody make any money off from Bigfoot?
Well, aside from us, I mean, you guys make you guys make like $2,000-3,000 a show. We only make what, $1,500, Jeff, something like that on one of ours.
Yeah, we make sure there's
on the hour. That's what Ray pays me. He must have upped you guys' salary. I don't really know. I don't really know what's going on, but the whole thing stinks. It's stunk ever since it got started. Who the hell knows, man, what the game plan is? I mean, I don't know. Maybe they like the PR. I don't know. So
do you think her co-authors are even credible? The ones that she's supposedly mentioning in there?
Has anybody we need some of these people that are good at detective work too, because I tried looking up a few of those people and I didn't have much luck.
And
interesting.
And on Google, I think it's pretty easy to find anybody that's got anything out there today. So that's a good point.
That was one of the things, was a lot of the people that are listed on her paper are listed as contributors to the paper because she used either articles or partial articles from them. They're not even really part of the study. She just used them in the study, so she had to list them like a bibliography. So not even the credible names that are on there are probably even directly involved in the study, because no one's even come forth to say, yes, I was in this study and I looked at this and it's credible. We've heard from like one person who sent in a sample who's a doctor, and he's a psychologist. He's not even a psychiatrist, and he submitted a sample and he's all on board because he's Dr. So-and-so, and he didn't even do anything with the sampling. Everybody that's listed there is like a geneticist or a lab tech that had anything to do with the actual study itself. So she's trying to force credibility by association.
And I don't know for sure, but people have funded that study and paid her. And here's how I look at this, because I've repeatedly said I'm not a geneticist. I mean, it's a bunch of gobbledygook to me. It doesn't mean crap. But here's the thing that does mean something to me. Supposedly, Matilda is a real Sasquatch that they're somehow connected to Ketchum, right? Why, if you have this footage, and supposedly they got other footage, and you have the ability, because she's claimed that she's seen 5 Sasquatches on a Bigfoot barbecue or some such nonsense before she took her page down, right? If you have this ability, why spend 5 years, $60,000, $100,000, however much you spent, sequencing the DNA from 100 samples if you've got a Sasquatch that you can creep up on that's sleeping? Why don't you just dart the damn thing, put it in a U-Haul, duct tape it to the trailer, haul it into town? You've proven the existence of Sasquatch. She claims that the paper's proven the existence of Sasquatch. It hasn't proven shit. How gullible we've all been for 5 years, waiting breathlessly for this thing to come out. Box up Matilda, man.
Well, that's that's exactly the idea. The paper proves nothing. The paper is nothing more than a simple. It's an essay on her hypothesis and conclusions. Without the data set, it's completely useless. And if you've looked at what the geneticists who have chimed in say, where's the data set? Where's this unknown hominid? That's the important part of all of this.
Matilda.
Okay, fine. Yes, Matilda is exactly the important part of it now, because the Erickson project was mysteriously able to circle in on 4 or 5 locations where they were able to get close and supposable footage of it. Now, Dr. Ketchum never claimed to have any footage of the 5 Bigfoots. She said that she would break their trust if she went out there and filmed it. But she did indeed, on her personal Facebook page, claim that she was involved with a family of 5 Bigfoot on several occasions, and that she wasn't going to bother with pictures or videos because it would be, it would be.
Well, no, but she also made the comment that her comment was that she didn't say that she didn't have video of them, implying that she did indeed have video, but she wasn't going to release it.
And since then, by the way, those statements have actually been edited off of the picture that she posted them on that page. I've actually verified that as of yesterday. That statement was made on a picture of her stick structure. And if you go back to her personal page and find that picture from April of 2011 when she actually made that statement was when that was, because it was posted on the Bigfoot Evidence blog. I did the research on it. If you go back to that picture now, you can edit a picture. You can't edit a comment or a post, but you can edit the description of a picture, and all of that information has now been erased from her personal page, as though she's trying to distance herself from those comments. And the good reverend here personally is not going to allow that to happen. I'm sorry. The woman is absolutely insane with the comments that she has made, and she's going to have to stand up to them and take responsibility for making them, because she wants to be accepted as somebody of importance in the Bigfoot community. I can't accept you as somebody of importance with actual science if you're an outright liar.
Right. Yeah, look at her behavior. Compare it to Meldrum. Do you see Meldrum trying to change his stance? Or, I mean, look at this. Excuse me. Meldrum, remember when the Snowwalker video, I think that's what they called it, right? Meldrum first came out and thought there was something to it. He kept at that, and when he found out that that was a hoax, he was the first person pretty much to come out and say it was a hoax. So, I mean, he didn't recant what he was doing. He simply announced, hey, I've discovered this is a bunch of bollocks, right?
And that's the idea of credibility, is you have
and
to...
integrity.
Exactly. I feel bad for Meldrum being rocked up in that whole, stupid tent thing, and I'm not even going to get into that because it's not even worth the airtime. But just the fact that moron involved him in it has now, got him a little scarce. But I was glad to see that Meldrum chimed in on Ketchum saying, look, he made an open statement that he couldn't back the paper due to what was released. And that was impressive to me because, I mean, after all, Dr. Meldrum is... he's almost our Jesus. I mean, everybody believes in what the doctor has to say.
Well, when we're talking about credibility, we're talking about being open, we're talking about even if it's something that it's results that we didn't expect or we didn't want. And, I think Bart Catino really stepped it up. And when they got the DNA results that came back from Justin's sample, then it was Bear. He was upfront about it. He was transparent the whole way through. And that's the only way we're going to get any kind of credibility is just being upfront, being honest, being transparent, even if it's not what we wanted to see. So,
what were your thoughts on that, Michael? When that, because we haven't talked to you since then. The DNA results that came back from Justin's test and Bart's test that came back, Bear contaminated with Justin. How did you feel about that when you heard that news? Well,
I wasn't surprised, but Bart. I hope I'm not breaching confidence, but Bart and I talked on the telephone. I think I said, my thing to Bart was, I said, well, because of course it always comes up as Justin doing a hoax, and I don't really know. I don't think Justin is doing a hoax. I don't know what the hell's going on. I said to somebody the other day, I don't really buy his story of shooting a Bigfoot because I need to see the body. But I've had eyewitnesses tell me, hey, I've seen a Bigfoot. That's a pretty outlandish statement to say I've seen a Bigfoot, and that's basically all Justin is saying, other than the fact that, oh, by the way, I had a gun at the time and I shot it. I mean, really, it's still more than an eyewitness account, right?
I've gone on record to saying I can't stand behind Justin and say that Justin shot a Bigfoot, but I can say that I believe that Justin believes that he shot two Bigfoot. I'll stand behind that statement because I haven't seen any evidence to the contrary that, in fact, he did shoot a Bigfoot because the DNA keeps coming back as either inconclusive. Right. The piece of meat that he turned in was never claimed to be Bigfoot. I want to say this again. I like to make truths come out here on the podcast. They went back. They found a piece of meat that was contrived enough to be in the same location, but the chances after 35 days or more of anything biological still being left over from that animal were slim. That's all that was ever said about that piece of sample that was turned in. And everybody assumed that he said this is a piece of the Bigfoot I shot, and that was not the case.
No, and to Justin's credit, he has never, ever said that. And like I told Bart, they went up there and they found that piece of meat with a bear dog, a dog that's trained to key into bear. They're in a location where people hunt bear. It's not that unreasonable to think they'd run across a piece of a bear meat up there,
And bear hunters leave pieces behind all the time, especially if they gut the animal right there on location. There may be slabs of pieces of fat or whatever of hair cut away that are just useless. If they're not going to tan the hide, they don't really care. They're just after the straps of the meat, and they'll only strap out the pieces of meat that they want and leave the rest for the vultures and for the cleanup crew of the forest to come behind and eat. We do that with deer all the time. We'll dress them right there in the field. So it's not unheard of for a piece of meat to be left behind from somebody that just took a bear.
Yeah, I think they were always.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kip.
Oh no, I was just going to say they were always upfront with the fact that whatever they found there was circumstantial. It was not something. Obviously, it wasn't. The sample wasn't taken right from the creature right after it happened. It was several weeks later. So
here's the thing that's going to blow people's minds, or it's going to blow some people's mind. When Roe's I'm going to pitch Roe's documentary for him. When Roe's documentary comes out, there's a backstory. There's more to this. Like on the surface, Justin's story is outlandish. It's ridiculous. I mean, I was on record. I mean, I hounded Justin, and then Roe and Sean and Bart and some other people, Dr. Jeff Melba, they took the time. Nadia Moore, all those guys, they all went up there, right, and they investigated. And so there's more to it than just Justin's story. So I'm undecided, man. I still want a body in a box, but I still do think people watch this Roe documentary. It's gonna blow your mind. It's gonna fill in some gaps.
Thanks
yeah,
for the plug,
definitely. I agree. I think it's going to be
my address for the check, right, Ro?
It's in the mail.
Yeah, okay.
And it's just like anything else. I mean, it's good to sit back from in the stands and make judgment calls on what's going on in the field. But when you're on the field, you're actually there. You're talking to the individuals who are involved. You're spending time with them, like we were able to do. You start getting a different perspective. And yeah, you're absolutely right, Michael. There's more to the story. It's not just somebody shot a Bigfoot and nobody believes him. Once you start to get to know the people, you can start to make your own judgments at that point. But it's hard to sit back from the stands and make that call. So
and another thing, people might look and they'll say, well, because the question is, why would Ketchum do whatever the hell she does? I mean, who knows why people? Some people, there's a certain nitwit in this field that I'm convinced just does it just to have his face, doesn't care whether it's good or bad. But most people, you think, well, you got to get paid for it, right? Now, what has Justin got out of this? Nothing but grief. I mean, I feel bad for the guy. Nothing. But I've given him a fair share of grief. Plenty of other people have.
He's one of the most hated people in Bigfooting. So yeah, what is he getting out of it? So it's he's a great guy. I know Justin. I count him as a friend. And yeah, I feel bad. I think he handles himself extremely well. Keeps his head up high. And considering the amount of grief and the amount of things that happened to him. So, hey, we got one more question from the chat room. So Racer X9X wants to know, how can a sample come back bear and the same sample come back Bigfoot from the same guy? So, kind of a good question.
When did that happen?
Well, I think that it wasn't the Ketchum, the supposedly the sample that was sent in. When it was tested separately, it showed bear. When it showed from her sample, it showed Bigfoot.
Well, there you go. I mean, on one hand, you've got what? You've got Bart Catino sending that sample to the Ministry of Canada or something, right? Some other sophisticated. And then you've got Ketchum with her easy bake oven cooking the DNA. You tell me who we should believe.
Next generation DNA sampling that you can't reproduce.
Right, next gen. She never tells us what the hell next gen is. It's just a fancy. See, you guys can do this. There was a study. There was a whole friggin' book wrote about fashionable nonsense. But there was a guy that did this lecture, and they had all these smart people they invited to it on a college campus. Complete bullshit. Okay, bunch of techno words, fancy charts and graphs, and they interviewed the people afterwards. What'd you think of the lecture? Wow, man, that guy's brilliant. Do you know what he's talking about? No, but it sounded really interesting. Like they didn't know what was going on, right? The emperor wears no clothes, sort of thing. They don't want to say they don't know what the hell it is. That's what Ketchum's doing. It's a bunch of science gobbledygook that doesn't amount to hill beans.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
If it amounted to hill beans, somebody of importance, people smarter than me, a university somewhere, would have showed some interest in this. It's not a conspiracy to silence her.
No, it's not. It's an effort to bring the truth forward and show that it's for the clownishness that it is. And with that, it's going to be time to wrap up this edition of the podcast. So, Michael, what do you got coming up in the future here, buddy?
Well, you guys can go to the Snowwalker Prime, my YouTube channel. That's where most of the stuff comes out. I think Ro has got something cooked up, exciting. I don't know. Is it top secret, Ro?
No, it's not. Can you guys hear me? I am working with Michael. Everyone knows that we have the Extinct podcast. It has been kind of on hold lately, but we are working on a new platform for Mr. Merchant. It should be premiering within a couple of weeks here, and we're really excited about it. There's going to be a little twist to this show that should make it pretty interesting. And I also want to thank our good friend and sponsor of all of the Rock and Roll Jihad podcast, Miss Tammy Murray, Sassy Glassy. She's always
Absolutely.
here for us.
I have one of those myself. I've got 5 of them now.
I don't have mine on right now.
You want to make sure that you go to the Bigfoot Report, and you also check out the Bigfoot Report YouTube channel. Visit the good Reverend Jeff here at the S Lounge Podcast YouTube channel, and make sure you check out all the good Facebook Team Taser fan page, the Squatchers Lounge, all the good pages that are out there. I want to give a big shout out to Mitchell Wilson in the Squatchers Lounge for helping us all the time. And there's Michael Merchant, Sassy Glassy Bears.
Nice.
Awesome.
Kip, what do you
Thanks
got?
Thanks a lot, guys, for inviting me on your show.
It is a pleasure to have you.
Kip, you got any shout outs you want to go through?
You hit Mitchell. That's great. Had a great time with Ro out in the field. About a week ago, Ro? We were out there with some amazing Bigfooters.
By the way,
so
the
shout out
City,
to
paper is featuring us on the front page.
Wow, that's awesome.
That's awesome.
Wow, awesome.
We'll have to get all you guys together and do a podcast just on that adventure up there as well. So we're looking forward to having Bart's information coming out here real soon. Justin should be having a statement coming out real soon. So there's a whole bunch of Team Taser stuff coming out, and we're just shooting to put the truth out there. We're not trying to put anybody down. We're not trying to be a conspiracy against anybody. Team Taser's just out there trying to spread the information and spread the love of Bigfooting. That's really what it's about.
All right, and with that,
as long as I get my rocket launcher.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another Rock and Roll Jihad production. We want to thank you for listening. Thank you to our guest, Mr. Michael Merchant. And signing off, I'm Ro Sahibi for the Squatchers Lounge podcast, and my good friends, the host of the show, Mr. Jeffrey Kelly and Kip Morrill. Ladies and gentlemen, that is our time. Good night.